Hey everybody, today I'm here to talk about the band Baroness, take a look at their albums, and do a ranking of those albums while I'm at it. So Baroness are a hard rock metal band formed in Savannah, Georgia, 2003. The main guy behind the band is John Baisley, very talented musician, very talented artist. He's done all the cover artwork for the band, as we're going to see, and he is the only constant member of the group. So their debut album will come out in 2007 on Relapse, and I bought that basically just based on a lot of the hype surrounding it, some of the bands they were getting compared to, and I thought it was cool. But I was just out of college, and I was working night shift at the grocery store, and one of my coworkers said, he didn't know me too well, but he goes, I get the feeling you like metal. You know the band Baroness? I'm going to the show, and you want to come along? And I said, no, it's funny you say that because I just bought the new album, and yeah, I definitely love to come along. What predominantly brought me to the show actually was Genghis Tron, if you remember them. They were opening, and I was a big fan of Board Up the House at the time, so I was definitely there. And that was actually for their first album. That was at Lee's Palace in Toronto. It was a packed house. I still remember back then John still had the long hair. They were absolutely killing it on stage. I still remember that as one of the best shows I've ever been to. Now, while I was at the show, I picked up this. This is a split release between Baroness and Unpersons. This came out in 2007 at A Lost Recordings. So it's 2 songs by Baroness and several by Unpersons. We're not talking about them right now, but we're already looking at some Baroness style artwork for sure. But I mentioned actually they put out 2 EPs before this, one called First in 2004 and one called Second in 2005, and it was more of a sludgy kind of thing. But this is the earliest recorded material that I have. And again, I bought it at the show. First song, Tiresias, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But that has definitely a big Mastodon vibe. And Mastodon are definitely a band that you compare Baroness to in many ways, but they're also very unique from each other. But the second song would be a more long, experimental, unique song. I hear some Torch, I hear some Isis. I still hear some Mastodon, but I hear that original Baroness flavor starting to become more prominent in their sound. So that being said, they have 6 full-length albums. The newest one is called Stone. It came out a couple months ago in 2023. And we're going to rank them from worst to best. As soon as Stone came out, I just said, you know what? I haven't spent a ton of time with Baroness lately, so I put all the CDs in the car. I listened to all of these at least twice very recently, and I was kind of surprised where my ranking went. So at the bottom of my list is Yellow and Green. And this is the bottom of the list for quite a few fans. But I'm actually kind of surprised I put it this low. I would have thought it was one of my favorites if you asked me a couple years ago. So there's 2 albums, Yellow and Green. Yellow is definitely the superior release because it has the 2 standouts on here. Take My Bones Away, which is probably the biggest Baroness rocker if you ask me, and Cocainium. I like the intros on both the Yellow theme and the Green theme. Definitely their most commercial release, and a lot of people at the time got upset by this, but at the time I really I didn't notice. I was like, what are people complaining about? This is a great album. It's not quite as heavy, but it's still awesome. But again, my more recent listening, I do have some critiques of it. And my 5 and number 6 are pretty close together, but I am giving this the bottom position. So my number 5 is the most recent album, 2023's Stone. I actually thought it would be last place. I do like this album, but I do have quite a few things that I'm not really into. So where to begin? The intro and the outro, Embers and Bloom. To be honest, I don't like them whatsoever. Not to be a jerk, but it actually kind of reminds me of that music they used to play at the end of that show, Intervention. It reminds me of that. I can't get it out of my head. There's another acoustic style piece in the middle called Dirge. I don't like that either. The first song, Last Word, I like the solo, but otherwise I don't like that song. Beneath the Rose, I don't like the vocals. Choir, again, I'm not a big fan of the vocals on that one, but I like the guitar harmonies. I like that original drum part where the drums get really loud momentarily. But the good news is that it has a pretty strong second half. Anodyne, Shine, Magnolia, Under the Wheel. 4 great songs in a row. And that has just sunk in recently, because if you would have asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have said this album has a lot of cool parts, a lot of cool textures, but not a lot of songs that I actually like. But I'm coming around on it. Another big change is that starting with Golden Grey, the last album, they got a new guitarist and backing vocalist, Gina Gleason. And she was all over Golden Grey, but you don't really notice it. And on Stone, it's a lot more noticeable. But she also doesn't sing too often on her own. It's definitely singing with John, same words at the same time. That's kind of what they're going for on this album, on quite a few songs. Okay, now we're on to my number 4. This is the 4th album, Purple. This has risen on my list. Several years ago, I would have told you this was their worst album. I have no direct complaints about it, outside of the fact that I always found it somewhat unmemorable. It just kind of glossed over me the first several times I listened to it. I always like Shock Me, which had to have been the first single. It's another Baroness rocker. Those are usually my favorite songs on the album, if I'm being honest. And for many years, I said Shock Me is the only song worth putting on a mixtape or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's very consistent, nothing bad. And my second favorite song on here is probably Desperation Burns. Number 3, 2009's Blue. I think a lot of fans put this at the top of their list, and I think it is an excellent album for sure. Probably their most classically metal album, I think. What are my 2 favorites? Swollen and Halo, and The Sweetest Curse. Like Purple, I find these are very consistent albums that just don't have the standouts that the top 2 albums have. So my number 2 and my number 1, I was having trouble picking which should get the top spot. But again, more recent reflection, I'm going to go with 2019's Golden Grey, their 5th album, as their number 2. I would have said this was their number 1 upon the time this came out and for the next couple years. There are things I'm not crazy about on the release. It's got nothing to do with the music, but this is probably my least favorite artwork by Baroness. But it's got a lot of variety and a lot of emotional weight on it. Songs like I'd Do Anything and I'm Already Gone, some people could say they're a little bit corny, but I think they do a great job of showing some emotion. A lot of interludes that work pretty well if you're talking about during the listening of the full album. And my 3 favorite songs on here are Tourniquet, Borderlines. Those are 2 songs I hear a lot of people say are the best ones. And Broken Halo, which is probably, if you ask me, my favorite Baroness song ever. So it's time for the number 1. You know what it is. This is Red, the debut album from 2007. Not only is it my favorite Baroness album, but it's also my favorite Baroness artwork as well. Yeah, this sticker on the cover. Again, I bought this right when it came out. Recommended if you like Mastodon, you could totally see it. Explosions in the Sky, Not really. Clutch? Sure. High on Fire? Sure. Mogwai? Not really. ISIS? For sure. Municipal Waste? Not really. So that's only somewhat accurate there. But this album, it's not one of my favorite albums ever, but I think it is a perfect album. There's not one thing I can complain about, not one thing I change about it. It's the most immediate album for sure, along with the second one. But Ray's Opinion, first song on the first album, one of the best still. Oh Appalachia, that's my second favorite. And we'll give the honorable mention to The Birthing. So that's it for my Baroness ranking. Check them out if you haven't, and thanks for watching.